Hi there, and welcome to the Love or Leave the Law podcast with your hosts, Adam Ouellette and Casey Berman. This is episode 13, and we are leaving off where we stopped with Gabe Rothman in episode 12. So we're going to jump right back in to where we ended in episode 12. Here we go.
Now, Gabe, one thing I want to bring up when you talk about fear, one of the big fear that Adam was saying, one of the big fears that many attorneys have is they're going to make a mistake. They're going to have a bad interview or something. Now, Gabe, you had one of your big moments, correct me if I'm wrong, was where you essentially got not yelled at, but you went to an interview and he kind of
he kicked my ass.
He kicked your ass. All right, there you go. And it was probably one of the most productive, informing, educating, essentially one of the best things you ever went through in this process. Tell everyone about it, because I know people are quaking in their boots. They don't want to have their ass kicked. They don't even want to make a mistake in an informational interview. A lot of these attorneys don't even want to fumble over the words, and you got your ass handed to you. Tell us about that.
It actually informed the entire way that I approached all of my subsequent interviews. And it's what ultimately landed me the Blue Wolf job, because I restructured my sales pitch around what I learned in this interview. So
that's great.
When I finally decided that I was done, I was definitely leaving. I said there's no timeline on this. I'm just going to start networking and bothering everyone I know to try to get interviews. So I landed very short order. I had interviews with Pandora, Facebook, Salesforce, LinkedIn, a slew of other companies. I didn't get any of those jobs. I got none of those jobs. But
that's like 5 or 6 rejections right there. I want everyone to hear that. Gabe went through a bunch of rejections, and you are still standing. You're still alive. The world hasn't ended.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was definitely a double-digit number of rejections. And it would follow the same pattern every time. I would network my way into the interview. I knew so and so, or I knew so and so who knew so and so, who was a recruiter or a hiring manager. I would get them on the phone. We would talk. They would be like, "Yeah, you sound great. I really like you. Let's bring you in for an interview." I would go and do an on-site interview or a couple of on-site interviews. And then when it came down to it, I always lost out to the person who had the exact right skill set, right? And we can circle back to that. I have some opinions on that component of it too. But I was introduced to a guy who was the vice president of product at a company called Zuora. And I was introduced to him actually through a former law colleague of mine. One of the partners at my previous firm introduced me to him. And he and I just met for breakfast. And we chatted and had a nice long talk, and he really liked me. We got along great. And he was like, "Yeah, I think you could, I think you have a lot to offer. You're clearly really smart. Let's see if we can't, find you a way in." So Zuora, it's Zuora, is a company that does subscription billing for software companies. Mm-hmm. It's a subscription billing platform. So this gentleman, the VP of product at Zuora, he got me an interview with the company's CEO. And their CEO is a guy his name is Tien Zuo. It's Tienz, I think it's Zuo. Tien Zuo. He was one of the first employees at Salesforce. I think he was employee number, 10, something like that. And, brilliant guy. Stanford undergrad, Stanford MBA, just really smart. So I went into this interview, and I took my same approach that I had been taking, which was not that dissimilar from the approach that I ended up evolving into. But I talked through look, I've done all these things. I'm really smart. I can analogize my skill set to all these things. And he started just grilling me on like, why should I hire you though? Specifically, I can find smart people out there. Like, why would I hire you, a 33-year-old, attorney, versus some 25-year-old kid out of Stanford, 20 or 2 years out of Stanford, 3 years out of Stanford, to do a relatively entry-level role in product and marketing, whatever. Like why specifically? And I didn't have an answer. I just did not have a good answer. And he just kept, every time I tried to
wiggle around,
lawyer my way around,
lawyer way out,
lawyer my way around the question, he just bring it back, and I remember at one point, he was like, well, tell me, like, what are the specific, like, metrics, like measurables? What are the measurable things that you've done? And I hadn't thought about it. And it turns out I did have measurable things, but I hadn't thought about it. Yeah. And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, what if I don't have any? And he looked at me and he said, get some. So nice. That's sort of and he wasn't, I want to be clear, he wasn't a jerk about it. He wasn't rude. He was almost sort of mentoring in a way. Like it was almost like, look, I'm going to put my arm around you and I'm going to shake you, right? I'm going to put my arm around you. I'm going to talk to you about what you need, but I'm going to shake you and give you a reality check. And like I said, he absolutely annihilated me in this interview.
And I know, and you're softening it. I talked to you afterwards, and you were still shaking. But the next day, and even 48 hours after the interview, not only had you calmed down, but you had really internalized these lessons. I remember that shift in you.
Yeah. I did some soul searching and kind of thought through, okay, like what did I just learn? Like, what can I learn from this? And a lot of that goes back to my attitude around the process in the first place, which was, as a lawyer, really hard to do, to not be like results oriented, to just go into it as like, okay, I'm just going to go out and try to meet as many people as I can, and I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep doing it until something pops, right? And
Gabe, before we move on, I want to talk about the rejection, the shaking, getting your ass handed to you,
and the lessons that you learned from that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, assuming it is inevitable for people looking to leave the law, let's assume you are going to have that coffee and that experience,
right?
And if you don't, okay, fine. But tips, tricks, thoughts on how to prepare, or thoughts on how to gird up for it. Because that is one of the main reasons people won't even start leaving the law, is they want to avoid that tough conversation.
Yeah. Honestly, like I said, I really think the biggest thing for me in terms of becoming okay with that type of a result goes back to really, like I said, not taking a results-oriented approach. Just saying, I'm okay with whatever happens. This is all part of the process of learning. And if I land a job right away, that's awesome. That's great. But also, honestly, the informational part of the interview is important. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to do an informational interview and cross my fingers that it turns into a real interview.
Right.
A lot of the stuff that I learned in all these different informational interviews was valuable. It was learning about what do companies want to hear, what do they want me to be, what skills do they want me to have, and all of that helped me to sort of refine my pitch. It got better and better and better. And also, it helped me to start to zero in on what I might actually like to do. Because, I pursued roles in marketing. I pursued roles in product management. I pursued operational type roles. Just anything, compliance roles. The role that I interviewed for at Salesforce was a contracts administrator role. And thank God I didn't get that. I probably would have hated it.
It's in Leave Law Behind, there's two main goals of the informational interviews. Once you've kind of gone through the steps, unique genius, once you're ready to get out there, and one is to research search. Is this a job I want? Do these people hate their life? Do they have that Sunday night anxiety like you talked about? Or do they like it? And then two are to get leads. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for meeting me for coffee. I want to let you get back to the office. Is there anyone else I can talk to? Sort of that continuing creating opportunities. But the first point, you make a great point, Gabe. Like, that isn't just perfunctory. Like, you just don't do that to get ultimately the leads.
Right.
Really delving into understanding what this job entails, how do these people like the job, whether it's in alignment. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, like really accept, and this is like a little new agey, but it's real. It really accept that the whole thing is a process, right? And just accept it as a process. And again, I know I'm very results oriented. It's very hard not to go there. But it's important to really stay focused on learning your lessons and really being introspective about the lessons that you're learning in terms of what you might like to do in a career. It's like the first day of law school. I remember they told us, and I think this definitely applies here. They said, "Don't get overwhelmed. Just chop the wood in front of you."
Yeah.
That I think that's a very important lesson for this. And certainly there's, everyone has a different time frame. There's financial considerations and all that. And, people have constraints and I get that. Not everyone, I don't know, maybe not everyone has 10 months, which is how long it took me. But, there are ways to obviously sort of work around that. And make it work. And we can get into that and that tactical stuff.
Gabe, we're gonna have you on more episodes down the road. Gabe has agreed. We're very happy that he'll come on, be a recurring guest, and talk through these things as we move forward. So I'm sure we'll get to all that.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately though, it is really about refining a pitch. If I had to sort of consolidate it down into one thing, it's use it as an opportunity to really develop your pitch.
Yeah.
And figure out what you really do want to do, because that's critical. You don't want to end up as a reader of the blog, leave sales operations behind, right?
That's right. No, it's a great point. A lot of people that I run into, they say, Casey, and these are people who I don't take on as coaching and so on, as they say, what about the job? What's my next job? And there's a lot of work like you've done 10 months or even longer, because you don't want to go from job you don't like law, into another job you don't like, even if it's non-law.
Yeah, but you may do that. You may go from job to job that you don't like, but that could be part of the path too. And I think, Gabe, you said something really profound, and this is stuff that I teach in my Esquire Academy, and this is, the path is the path, and if you're not resisting the path and what is in this moment right now, you can always understand that you're being brought to wherever you're being brought to for a reason, for the lessons, for the understanding that, okay, well, if I do take this job after the law and I hate it, well, that's okay, because now it's like when you're out on the dating market, right? You're dating different people, men, women, and you're dating these one. Oh, I don't really like this. I don't like that. But it's lining up for you the fact that here's what I don't like. It helps you to build what you do like and understand more at a deeper level. Here is what I really like, and then what do I love? So there is no harm, as far as I'm concerned, in the path of maybe taking a job that you don't really like, if that's what feels okay in this moment, or maybe there is no other jobs available, so you got to do something to pay the bills. And so I think that's part of the problem that we have as human beings, is that we look at something and say, well, am I really going to love it? Sometimes you just don't know until you go into it and see, and I think that's part of the process.
Let me say one thing, Adam. I think you're absolutely right, Adam. Let me clarify. My point was, without doing some of that work around unique genius, that process work, I think it's really important to take that time to think about what you're good at.
Oh no, I agree, Casey, and I wasn't poo-pooing your point at all. I wasn't trying to prove you wrong.
This time,
I was.
This time,
yeah.
He wasn't. What I see are people who come in and I should have clarified more. What I see are people who come in and say, "Hey, Casey, I don't like my law job. Get me another job."
Right.
And that's exactly why I intervened, because that's the problem, is they're just looking to hop from job to job. And I think, Gabe, you were lucky enough to have that 10-month period where you were able to sit down and interview for tons of different positions. And it sounds to me like 95% of what you interviewed for, you weren't either right for or you wouldn't have liked. And so that's why you didn't get those jobs. So if it's meant to be, we talk about some new agey stuff in this. I talk about some new agey stuff in my book because there is an aspect of life that you just don't know about. So how can we discount everything?
To jump, we've got about 10, 15 minutes left. Gabe, Adam talks a lot about beliefs and crafting new beliefs and how this turns into habits and so on. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear kind of the two you maybe Adam, throw out some of your thoughts on beliefs, and then I'd love to hear Gabe kind of, can you maybe unpack some of the beliefs you had in 09 and 10 about yourself and how that's changed, right?
Well, let me jump in first, and I'll tell you a little bit about my path out. Well, in the law in terms of loving the law, and then finally out of the law. And part of it was really doing exactly what I talked about. What do I love doing and what do I not like doing, and what's kind of in the middle. But part of it also was reading lots of books on what's your life purpose. And when we talk about unique genius, I think those two ideas go hand in hand, because I think we have multiple life purposes. My life purpose was to be a lawyer for 19 years and then say, hey, I'm going to go do something else because I've satiated this. That was part of the purpose. And so I don't think we have just one purpose where that's it. We ring the bell and say, we know what it is. I'm good to go. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Now,
that's interesting.
Back in the day, when people got jobs in the 50s and 60s and 70s and maybe part of the 80s, even as lawyers, when you had a job, you had a job for life.
Yeah.
Whether you loved it or not. But the problem with that is a lot of people don't love what they're doing, and there are so many opportunities that we don't see nowadays. But as I started reading these books on life purpose, it started to give me a better aspect around, well, what do I believe about working? What do I believe about being in a career? And what is it that I believe about life? Because a lot of my beliefs were the old beliefs that a lot of us have in mass consciousness that most of us share, and that is it's hard to make a living, you can't really love what you do, it's hard to make money, which are all bullshit as far as I'm concerned. And so when you look at your beliefs around what's possible, and I have done some work with people leaving the law, and as I interview these people and I try to help them, and I have helped quite a few people in terms of getting to the place where finding what they really want to do and what they love. And part of it was their belief systems didn't align with believing that there's a possibility, even the remotest possibility of using what do I love doing, and taking those things and creating a career around them. That, for me, was a big eye-opener when I talked to this young lady who was only a lawyer for 3 years, and she absolutely hated it. And I went through – I think we talked a little bit about this on a previous issue, but I really want to jump into what Gabe's got to say, but I think this is very apropos. And I'm asking her, is there any part of the law that you might like? And she's like, no, I want out. And I'm like, okay. And unfortunately, I didn't know Casey at the time, because I would have said, hey, you got to talk to this guy. So I was just trying to help her as much as I could while we were sitting there all having dinner. And she's talking about some things that she really loves. And then her friend steps in and says, you can't make any money at that. And I looked at the friend, and I really wanted to say, look, lady, shut your pie hole. Because you don't know what she can do with anything. Maybe you don't believe that, but you can see that the friend's beliefs were totally not aligned with her. But if she really loved doing what she was talking about doing, she could make money with it if she paved the pathway to that.
That's right.
Gabe, talk to us a little bit about how beliefs played a role in your leaving the law, and then how they either hindered you or helped you.
Yeah. So I would say the number one probably false belief system I had, and I distinctly remember this because it played a big role in my decision to go to law school in the first place, was so when I first moved up, I mentioned when I first moved to the Bay Area, I kind of wanted to work in tech, and obviously had a really hard time getting a job because it was the year 2000 and tech companies were dropping like flies. So I kind of bounced around. I worked as a project coordinator at the worldwide headquarters of DHL, the shipping company. They were down in the financial district, and that was okay. It was fine. And then I worked as a graphic designer doing support for their sales team at IBM for a little while. And that was cool. But I just didn't have anything that felt like a career. I just wasn't making progress towards something that I felt like, okay, this could be something I do forever. And so I started thinking through it. And honestly, I didn't really, they were fine, but I didn't really like those jobs. And I started to realize I had this opinion of myself, honestly, that I was lazy. That was just how I viewed myself. I was like, yeah, I'm just lazy. I'm really smart, so I can get by and be successful in a lot of things, being lazy. And I kind of came to the conclusion, well, I'm lazy and I just don't like work. I don't like having a job at all.
Wow.
So
yeah.
So I then from there took the bizarre logical leap to, okay, well, if that's the case and I don't like work, I may as well make a lot of money, right? I may as well find something that I can make money at because I'm not going to like it no matter what. The missing piece of that is, well, if you're lazy, maybe the law isn't the best place for you to be. but I said, well, let's investigate this law school thing, and I'll take the LSAT, and we'll see how I do on the LSAT. And if I do on the LSAT, because I only wanted to go if I could get into like a top tier school.
Oh yeah.
So I took the LSAT. I did very well, and ended up at Hastings, which I ended up, like I said, actually really loving and really enjoyed that. But the underlying philosophy that I had was just incorrect, patently incorrect, which is that, okay, I can go to law school, I can become a lawyer, and if I just put my nose to the grindstone, keep my head down, and work hard, and and do that, eventually I'll make a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
It was almost in my mind like, oh, it's just a guarantee. If I just work hard, I'll make partner, and then I'll make a bunch of money. And there's so many incorrect assumptions in there about being a lawyer. One is that if you just work hard, you'll make partner. No, false.
Yeah,
false.
Yeah, not the case.
And the other is if you make partner, you'll make a ton of money. Also not true.
Right.
Right. There are people out there. So, and then I started, as I was actually working as an attorney, I started to realize, like, okay, there are people making a lot of money out there. A lot of them have been lawyers for 30 years.
That's right.
Yeah. 20 years, 30 years, whatever. And a lot of them are making good money, but they're not making amazing money.
No, it's difficult to make amazing money as a lawyer. I don't care how big of a firm it is. Now, there are some big firms where people make ridiculous kinds of money, but that's a very small segment of our profession.
And a lot of them have no life. A lot of them,
sadly.
A lot of them, do 2,500, 3,000 hours a year, which is insane.
Oh, it's nuts.
So I got to the point where I realized, I was like, okay, well, if making a lot of money as an attorney, and I'm just being completely honest, that was my primary motivation. I was like, I don't have any other goal career-wise because I don't like to work, was my perspective. So I'm just going to make a lot of money. So I came to the conclusion, well, okay, so if I want to make a lot of money, and it's no guarantee, which is by far not a guarantee, so it's a gamble either way, right? I'm gambling on this. So if I'm going to gamble on the upside of making a lot of money, first of all, I don't want my upside to be, and look, I'm not saying this isn't a great living at all, but I'm just going to throw out a number there. I'm just going to throw out a number just as a point of reference, right? So in my mind, I said, look, if my upside is $500,000 a year, which is a great living, I don't want to take the gamble. I don't want to gamble on $500,000 a year, especially in exchange for, 2,200 billable hours a year, right? I don't want to put in that much work for the maybe possibility that maybe I'll make $500,000 a year.
Right.
And the conclusion I came to was like, well, let's go back to that tech idea that I had back in 2000, because in tech, there's the equity component, right, of getting into a company. Now you have to work your way up to a position where you have a big enough equity stake that you can have a massive exit. But the point is, if it's a gamble one way or another, even though it might be a bigger gamble in tech, I would rather gamble on the upside of a $20 million exit, right, at some point in my career. If you're saying that your upside is 20 years out, right?
Yeah.
So if your upside is 20 years out and that upside is a $500,000 a year salary, I'd rather say, okay, 20 years from now, maybe I'm, instead of a partner at a firm, I'm an executive at a startup, and because I've worked my way towards it, I've got 500,000 shares in this company, right? And if we exit, I could potentially make $10 million, $20 million. I would rather that be my upside, even if it's a riskier proposition. So a lot of that really speaks to, philosophically how I was approaching it, the view that, this is really just a guarantee if I just work hard, which it's not.
And I think what's great also is like inherent in that was a few other beliefs was I shouldn't do anything that I enjoy or that I'm creative about. Like just things are probably going to be hard, no pain, no gain.
Right.
And you know what? I like how it evolved. I mean, you're talking big numbers, but why not? Like, why not talk about $500,000 a year? And why not talk about these? And I think, there's this idea of, well, if I just plug along and I make, what's the median amount for my geographical area and I make that money and then I'll be okay and I can afford college. And, it's kind of the same idea. And so I think these beliefs of you, and I saw you shift where you started talking like that about, I remember you and I got coffee and you're like, well, and you're doing the numbers. And I remember looking at you going at first like, Jesus, who is this guy? And then I remember going, well, why not? Why not think these big numbers? Why not think this way? And so
if you don't, it definitely won't happen.
Well, yeah, because you can't believe it, and it's part of the process where if you can't believe it, it normally won't happen. And that's why people that win the lottery end up either losing or getting their money stolen, or they don't have any money left because they don't believe that they are entitled, whatever the belief is. But as we wrap this couple episodes up that we've done here, I remember feeling very lazy as a lawyer, especially my first 5 years, because I wasn't connected with it. I didn't really like it. But then as I started connecting with it, and then now connecting with my career at this point, I don't feel any laziness because I really love what I'm doing. But back then, my God, I wanted to put my head down on the desk and go to sleep. And that was at the advent of the internet's coming on and dial-up and all that shit. Jesus, I'm dating myself. But being able to then, if you just surf the internet because I just didn't feel like working, that's a key. That's a clue. And we talked about this in a couple previous episodes. Clues that you're on your way out. You're feeling lazy. I mean, that's really what it was for me. And so we're going to wrap this up at this point. Gabe, we really thank you for joining us today. I think this was very eye-opening for everybody that we've talked to. We're going to have you back a few more times because we want to continue this discussion. There is a lot more to ask you. I mean, Casey, we have some questions that Casey outlined, and we didn't get through a lot of them because there is a lot to leaving. And having this practical knowledge from you, Gabe, I think is going to be eye-opening to a ton of people listening, and we really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, happy to do it. Yeah, it's there's a lot of people out there that, I'm sure feel similarly to how I felt, and I want to help those people. In fact, Casey and I just had a success with one of his other clients, who I introduced to some of my former colleagues from Blue Wolf and have made her an offer. So, it's exciting.
Gabe, it's great to have you. Everyone listening, this happens. Gabe is testament to it. This other woman that he's talking about, who I worked with, who I introduced to Gabe connected her. She just left the law for a tech job. This actually happens. We're going to have Gabe on more. If you have any questions, again, email us, contact us. If you have any questions for Gabe directly, He has offered to answer those questions. He's very busy, but I'm sure we'll get an answer back to you. But I want to thank everyone for joining the podcast. We're so happy to have you. And again, I want to reiterate that Gabe is a real live person who's gone through the work, who's taken the steps and become comfortable with the process, and now is not only has left the law, but is really in alignment with what he's doing and is kind of a rising star in his sort of niche area in tech. Yeah. So, Gabe, thank you.
You're welcome. And I don't think that I'm lazy anymore.
No, I didn't figure. I figured that.
A shift. I know. Well, you're really busy. It was tough to get a time to talk to you. How busy you are. So you're definitely not lazy.
Yeah.
But Gabe, thank you. Adam, again,
thanks,
always
guys.
Great with you. And so thank you both very much. I'll see both of you guys at the next podcast. And I hope to our audience, again, we're so happy to have you. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Great.
Bye for now.
Thanks, guys.